It was a big week for tens of thousands of Shia Muslims in Canada. The Aga Khan, the spiritual leader of Imami Ismaili Muslims, was on a three-city tour of the country. In Ottawa, he became an honorary companion of the Order of Canada and laid the cornerstone for the new Global Centre for Pluralism. After a stop in Toronto, he headed to Vancouver for religious events. His followers regard the Aga Khan as the 49th direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. He's also a successful businessman, and his Aga Khan Foundation supports social development projects in poor countries. The CBC's Alison Smith sat down with the Aga Khan earlier this week. Here is that conversation.
Your words are that the most preoccupying global threat is the failure of democracy. What do you mean?
I think there's been, for a number of years now, a lot of pressure, particularly on the developing world that I know, to bring in democracy. And while the notion is one I fully support, democracies don't run themselves. People run them. And my sense is that in many, many countries, the sorts of human capabilities that are necessary to make democracies function in their multiple forms are not there. There's a tendency to use democracy as though it was a generic term, but it isn't. There are so many different forms of democracy.
So what does that suggest then about how you look at, for example, the efforts by the United States to bring democracy to Iraq and to Afghanistan?
If you look at Afghanistan, or you look at Kenya, or you look at other countries in the developing world, and you think of the number of countries that are redesigning their constitutions today, they have to make serious, considered decisions as to the profile of the constitution they want that suits their country, their demography. Then they have to decide whether democracy, such as what's common in the West, can work. I'm not sure that democracies in countries which have 60 or 70 political parties are going to be stable democracies. So I think the issue really is how to sustain and help these countries develop leadership which is able to function within the new constitutions that are coming forwards. One of the serious questions I have is, for example, in education. It's traditional in North America, much of Western Europe, to educate on government. That doesn't happen in a large number of countries of the developing world.
Is this part of what you call the clash of ignorance?
No, the clash of ignorance I applied really to the relations between the Muslim world and the rest.
So what does the West have to do then? Because we now see the prospect of the Group of 8 leaders getting together and essentially talking about relieving the debt of the poorest countries in Africa.
Right.
What kind of a commitment do they need to make, in your view?
I think they need to make a commitment to understand what are the inputs that would be required to assist these countries to develop functioning democracies. And that needs to be, in my understanding or my view, would be tailored to the requirements of each country or tailored to the region.
One of the things you've done in Canada is establish this global centre for pluralism.
Right.
Tell me what you mean by pluralism and how that fits into your notion of civil society.
Well, in the past decades, I've had a feeling that in Europe, but also in Asia and Africa, many of the conflicts have been driven by peoples or faiths or tribes who do not accept the existence of others, who want power or who want to normatize religious attitudes or things of this sort. And I don't believe these societies are born into the acceptance of pluralism. I think societies get educated about pluralism. I think young children can be educated without it even being a process, to recognize and accept people of different backgrounds, different faiths, etc. And I would hope that there could be a process in place drawn from Canadian experience, and I mean drawn from Canadian experience, where it becomes the psyche of these countries to base their development programs on the acceptance of pluralism, seen as an asset.
Why Canada?
because you, of all the developed countries that I know, have committed yourselves infinitely more than anybody else to this exercise. And Canadians are humble about they talk about it as a work in progress. They're right, but it's always going to be a work in progress. And I think that you have accumulated experience over decades, which we really can learn from.
I mean, obviously that's closely connected to your drive for democracy in all its forms, as you put it. It's also connected, and I'll go back to it, it's also connected to the clash of ignorance that you talk about, though, too, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't really build pluralism unless it's based on education. It's got to be based on a minimum of understanding and knowledge.
You know, so much of education is about having a wider view of the world. Right. And you have that. You travel, you have Ismaili communities all over the globe. Right. So often in countries where that wider view does not exist, as you point out, there are rural communities. There are people who don't have an opportunity to go beyond their village, in a sense. How do you inculcate that wider view without affording people, in a sense, the opportunity to get beyond the village?
Right, right. But I think our experience with rural development in mixed communities, and we've done a lot of that work in a large number of countries, in Africa, in Asia, Central Asia, with CEDA help, amongst others. What we've learned from that is that in those contexts, pluralism is equitable access to opportunity, rather than monolithic carrying of despair. Mm. And if there is equitable access to opportunity, communities come together because they're looking to the future. And they're looking to that future with hope. And they're entitled to believe in that. And they're entitled actually to manage that.
It's a real pleasure to talk with you. Thank you very much.